I think we need a little more. Let's get a little more. It's pretty good. You know what? Anytime I see people paint with a wet palette, they're everyone is so good about keeping the wet palette and the paint that you put onto it in a small little dab and not having it spread out. But I find that I'm always like kind of making it spread out much farther than it should. That's just a weird thing for me, I guess. Okay, let's work on making like a secondary base coat, I guess. And really highlighting... Okay, hold on. Just gonna make sure there's no dust on these guys. Maybe it'd be worth getting some canned air for the purposes of blowing dust off of the miniatures. Alright. So it looks bright now, but I think it'll kind of come down a bit as it dries. And this coat is going to almost completely cover the base coat. Are these boots, or are they like... Is this armor? I really can't tell. I'm assuming it's armor because they have like little studs on them. I'm actually not sure. We'll go back with a smaller brush and do some of the details on the chest. Or not. Let's just do this. Feeling brave. Okay. One thing that I'm trying to get better at and trying to understand a little better is kind of painting according to the direction of the model. That's not the best way to phrase it, but what I mean is I've seen a number of videos where the person making the video, the commentator, recommends sort of following the flow and the direction of the model and the part that you're painting and making your brushstrokes contour to that. I feel like my tendency is to just slap it down without thinking about that at all. But that actually recalls something that my painting instructors back in art college would say as well, and that's pretty interesting just because for painting and illustration, you know, we're working with a 2D flat image, right? So one would think that the direction of your brushstrokes and stuff shouldn't matter, right? Because it's a 2D image. But I think it actually helps in getting a sense of form. And even with a 2D image, you're sort of helping to communicate that form by following the proper directions of your brushstrokes. So that's something I'm trying to keep in mind from the YouTube videos, and as well as my art school instructors from years ago. Their ghostly image is floating above my head, telling me to step away from my painting and all that stuff. Okay, so the paint on this brush is almost all gone. So we can actually now move on to this chainmail and work on that and do a bit of kind of like dry brushing a bit. Over here. Because I just want to have these guys match the rest of the Eldar. And to do that, we need to instead of picking apart every single little detail with a different color and creating difference, we actually want to create harmony, visual harmony. These old Eldar models, they're kind of weird, they're kind of goofy, but they also feel really alien in a way that modern Eldar kind of don't. Modern Eldar, they have a bit of a high-tech appearance. Maybe a little anime, a lot of anime actually. Excuse me while I have some tea. And it's not like the anime influence was a thing that only existed like now with the modern Eldar models. I'm pretty sure that even in the earliest days of the Eldar, there was some thought put towards anime, and Jess Goodwin, I feel like he definitely was sort of tuned into that in some way, shape, or form. There's a Twitter account that I really like. It's called Art Eater, I think that's the one. And that user describes some of those connections between Warhammer and anime. And yeah, there was like a couple of models from like the second edition or even older era of Citadel miniatures, and that the names of some of the models were like straight up from anime or something. Like one was called Tetsuo or something along those lines. I should actually look into that a bit more so I can relay that information back. It's pretty interesting. The cross-pollination of influences, that's something that's always fascinated me with various media and the things that I like, whether it be anime or miniatures or comics or movies or whatever. And especially with things like Cowboy Bebop, the anime, how that just comes from such a mix of different influences, and it all came together into something really awesome. And we're not talking about the the live action, no. Let's all just forget that live action thing happened. I haven't even watched it. I don't know if I ever will. Okay, so you can already tell how much brighter the model is now, thanks to this this layer now of what? Caledon Sky. So let's actually carry on with that. Pardon me while I blow my nose. Alright. And I also find it interesting how there's a certain contingent of Japanese model making fans that are getting into Warhammer 2. And I follow a few people on Twitter and on Instagram from Japan that are getting into the Warhammer hobby, and it's pretty cool just because I feel like Japan is a country that really appreciate scale models and model building. Obviously, many companies like Tamiya, Bandai, they all specialize in making miniatures. And of course, Games Workshop is a UK company that's very good at making miniatures. So it's just interesting to me to see how like Japanese fans have gotten on with Games Workshop stuff, and it's really cool seeing the things that they make, the models that they make, the differences. What do they do differently? So I'm actually trying to blend here just a little bit. I'm not the best at blending. Let's be perfectly honest, but with these large surfaces here, I think it's best to do some blending. Go in with I feel like the paint is already dried here. I do have some medium and some retarder that'll keep the paint more whoa more wet. And I think we need to do another level of blending because I think it's too dark still. So let's do that. Should I find my paint retarder? Nah. I'll look for it later. I say that a lot. I'll look for it later. Okay, let's get a healthy heaping of the blue, and now just and then I think we gotta go back now. Back with the dark stuff. Okay, good enough. I'm losing grip on this thing. I've got paint on my fingers. Yeah. Pro style. Okay. Let's go back and reinforce this, the blue. Another layer. And again, I kind of want to follow the shape and the contour of the model as I'm doing this. I also need to blend this in as well, or rather not blend it, but I think I'll just kind of do a bit of glazing to bring it back down. I'm leaving the darkest, shadowiest parts of the model, that dark blue, from the base coat. And this coat, for example, the underside, it's not being exposed to a lot of light, so I don't think I should really do too much highlighting to it. Okay, now let's pick out the legs again. We'll wait on that. Okay. Not bad, I think. The thing about these these old metal models is that they feel a little more two-dimensional. The poses are a little more flat, a little more basic. That's partially due to just the process of making these models and the manufacturing process. And it's something that the sculptors, I'm sure, had to factor in as well as they were sculpting and making these models, was that they were going to be metal, and so they had to feel very sturdy, right? They had to be in a pose that would support itself. That's not something that I feel like modern miniatures need to concern themselves with as much. Certainly they need to be balanced and they need to stand. But because models these days are plastic, it's a far lighter material. They can be hollow on the inside, unlike these models, right? So between that and digital sculpting, it means that models can be very free in their posing and their positioning these days. You see that all the time. Models like flying around on a swirling current of energy, or flipping out on one leg. That's something that you often see with miniatures these days, that while it might be possible to some extent with older miniatures, it's just not, it just wouldn't be as easy, I think. But at the same time, one thing that I really appreciate about these miniatures is that very same reason, that they have to feel sturdy, they had to feel solid, and in doing so, not just feel, but they had to be solid. But that lent itself a very grounded look, a very sturdy and realistic look that I think we kind of lose nowadays, when like every single model's flipping out, jumping in the air, balancing on one foot. You lose a little bit of that groundedness. But I also appreciate, and this is more like the lazy part of me, but I also appreciate that simplistic nature of these models meant that, sorry, I kind of lose my train of thought, and I'm also trying to paint too. But also meant that these models were very easy to paint, very easy to work on. It's almost like as if you were working on a stamp, like if you're painting a stamp or some other kind of 2D thing, where it's like, here's the front, paint the front, there's the back, paint the back, and then the side profile isn't something you really need to concern yourself with. You'll kind of, it's so thin on the side, right, that you'll get all those parts. Whereas, take this model for example. This is a plastic Necron, and it's not even the latest plastic Necron. This is a fairly older one. Now you have to kind of think about getting underneath the arms, you know, between the legs, here in the armpit, behind the gun, underneath the gun. You have to think about getting all those areas now. And it just wasn't really a thing that you had to think about with these models, just because, you know, the gun wouldn't, they wouldn't really pose the gun right in front of the chest of the model this way. At least if they did, it would be, there wouldn't be any kind of gap between the chest and the gun. There'd be some big piece of plastic where the gun would be very close to the chest. So it'd be like one piece.